really smart aesthetic technologies that do the job, that are worth paying for, and that in the hands of really strong experts are reproducible for all women who want these options.
And I know right now we're going for this whole thing of body positivity and accept your body as it is. If you can do things to make yourself look and feel better, why are we not allowing women to step into that and really own that narrative?
Cellulite is not body related, not age related, not weight related. When you talk about cellulite, the words that women bring up, it is paralyzing. Really, they will talk about it as disgusting, embarrassing, would never do X, Y, Z.
Because I felt so self-conscious about having this kind of pressing and dimpling that I didn't want to go for yoga and wear something like that or Pilates because I was so self-conscious. I spent half my workout thinking about the back of my legs versus just focusing on the workout. I was like, to hell with that. I just want it taken care of. Welcome to another episode of Biohack-it, and I am very excited to bring you today's episode because I know all the women listening to my podcast, and they ask for it, struggle with cellulite. We all do. It's just inevitable. It's part of our life. It's part of our genetics. Things happen. But I have researched and found you a solution, a one-time treatment that helps take care of it. So thank you, Gato, for being on the show with me. And Gato is the CEO of Avéli, a treatment that I tried and absolutely loved. I think it was about 3 to 4 months ago.
Yeah, I think so.
And I loved it. You go in. It's a one-time treatment for the areas that you have. And you're in, you're out. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a super important subject, right? So many of us suffer from it. So very passionate about it and can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah. I wanted to, before we go into your current role at Avéli, I want to talk about what we were discussing earlier is your incredible background being in the aesthetic space where there tend to be a lot of men, you know, whether it's Allergan or, you know, other companies. It's led a lot by men, and having a woman founder, like a CEO in your case, leading this kind of space is just amazing.
Well, thank you. So yes, I am the CEO of the makers of Avéli. So we're a company called Revel Aesthetics. And I've had the good fortune of essentially bringing this company to life. But before that, I've had a long history in medical aesthetics, 25 years in healthcare, neurosciences, ophthalmology. But to your point, just fell in love with medical aesthetics because I think oftentimes we talk about self-confidence. It's a nice to have, but it really is a must have. So essentially, I'm also a mom of 3 kids, and they're all 3 girls. So this is a topic really important to me. But you're right. So medical aesthetics is a market that's been super vibrant from the start. It's a market that predominantly serves women. So to obviously, as a woman, to be in the seat to help design technologies that is specifically for us, it's very personal, right? And so you have a big commitment to really making sure that we give treatments that are truly visible for women and give them the results that they want, that are safe, that are obviously efficacious in the right hands. And that was sort of the whole purpose behind building Revel, which is let's make really smart aesthetic technologies that do the job, that are worth paying for, and that in the hands of really strong experts are reproducible for all women who want these options. So I've had the opportunity to essentially join a company, Allergan at the time, the makers of Botox. So I've had a long journey in medical aesthetics, from the birth of the neuromodulators to dermal fillers to breast implants to energy-based devices, and now precision instruments like Avéli that are very focused on body contouring. And therefore, I sit on a lot of different boards, startup companies that obviously are very passionate about medical aesthetics. So that's a little bit about my background.
I think it's incredible to be able to take all that you've learned from different places of, seeing the research, what's coming out, and then being part of something like Avéli, which is a one-time treatment. You go in, it helps right away. You can see the results over 3 months, which is what I did. I saw actual results. And I feel that this space, when it comes to medical aesthetics, is full of people trying to sell a lot of snake oil. You know, sometimes you go in and there's like, do these 6 treatments, and then still nothing comes of that area because they're trying and testing it on different clients as it goes, right? But with Avéli, you guys kind of like really nailed down the treatment, the protocol, and I personally saw the improvement right away, and I see other people's before and afters as well. I've spoken to people and their results were really amazing.
Well, I'm glad that was your experience. But it's also the reason why we built the company to begin with. And a little bit of an interesting background is our technology, Avéli, was essentially born out of a medical device incubator that was built in Silicon Valley that had always designed very disruptive technologies that were actually in hardcore therapeutic spaces, cardiology, urology, ENT, and those founders of that incubator in 2018 started to look broader than those sort of areas and said, what are some skin conditions perhaps that are unsolved for? And so they already had a very sort of disciplined path to designing innovation and started to take an interest in cellulite because it was a big skin condition, again, an issue that hadn't been solved and nobody had cracked the code. And so they pulled together a group of engineers, all Stanford trained, mechanical engineers, clinical engineers, and for just a few years, all they did was essentially study the underlying anatomy, really trying to understand why has nothing worked in cellulite? Why is that? And they did a lot of cadaver labs to really understand what is the cause of all these divots and depressions that women have. And that's essentially that led to an aha moment for them where they understood that, like acne, cellulite is a multifactorial problem. So we have a dermis that thins, we have fat cells that become larger, and then you have these bands. So we have fibrous bands underneath our skin, and we have millions of them. But essentially what happens, and this happens for women post-puberty, they shrink and they stiffen and they put physical tension on the surface of our skin, and that causes these dimples or kind of these little divots. And when our engineers started to, in cadaver labs, really study kind of what's underneath the skin, they also realized that these bands that in the literature are always shown as these single bands are actually these multiple bands, like these complicated webs. And that made them understand that you can't tackle that issue from the outside. So that led to the design of Avéli, which is, can we go underneath the skin with a little precise instrument that gives a trained provider, the opportunity to really identify where is that whole web of bands that have been tensioning the skin, release them in a very precise way, but then most importantly, allow for a verification of that release during the procedure before we move on to treating the next dimple. And that's essentially what has made Avéli a one-time treatment that is so precise and so targeted, because we go underneath that skin and we really identify where are these bands that have been causing the little dimple on the surface of it.
And I think also it's really important to mention that because you guys are so specific and targeted, people kind of know going into it, hey, these are the areas you can treat.
That's right.
This is the areas that's actually skin laxity.
Yes.
This is a big difference. And so I want to also talk about that, the difference between skin laxity that you guys have found scientifically versus actual cellulite.
Yeah, great question. So I'd say below sort of the waist, right? So what we call the lower extremities. So the legs, the booty area, right? Most of us women have a few specific issues. And similar to the face, you have your Botox that you use for wrinkles, you have your fillers that you use kind of for kind of restoration of those lines, and then you have kind of energy-based devices for skin resurfacing. Below the waist or in the lower extremities, you also have distinct issues going on. And so there's the issue of cellulite. So essentially any irregularity on the surface of the skin that has these defined edges. So divots, dimples, depressions, if you will. We have them on our buttock, we have them on our thigh. Then there's the issue that you called out, which is laxity. So loose skin. It's different from the dimples and the divots. It truly is loose skin. And then there's the issue of fat. So generally we accumulate these kind of pockets of adiposity or local fat in areas that we don't like, right? So mostly in the lower legs or in the booty area, we have all three. Unfortunately, most of us women are not spared from that. So it's very important when we talk about sort of, I'd love to have some better looking legs, or I'd love to have smoother skin in my sort of bottom and the leg area, that we first distinguish what is what, right? So Avéli treats those dimples or that cellulite, but we don't treat the loose skin and we don't treat the fat. And that's why when you go to a trained provider, right, they can do what we call a global assessment, which is really look at sort of say, what are the areas you're most concerned about? And then we'll talk about what is what, right? Sort of what causes these things and anatomically, and how can we treat them. And mostly for the lower legs or the booty area, it is essentially requiring sort of a multimodality combination approach, right? Which is we're going to pair different technologies together to make sure that we address all your issues.
And that's what I did in my treatment. Yeah. That's what I loved about this as well. I went to an incredible provider in South Miami. So I did my Avéli treatment, and then they looked at certain areas and they said, Iman, this is not cellulite. This is skin laxity. And then I started a course of Morpheus 8 that addresses that skin laxity for you.
Yeah, that's right. And so Avéli is a perfect foundational treatment for cellulite. And then there's like what we call adjunct treatments, right? And many providers will essentially, to your point, look at what else do you need and sort of come up with a combination protocol that will work. But what I think is really interesting, Iman, now too is, you know, for the last 2 decades in medical aesthetics, and you know this as well as I do, it's all been about facial rejuvenation, right? It's about the toxins and the fillers and sort of the professional skincare, all things that are so important. But now what's happened is sort of with such a focus on facial rejuvenation, now that this medical weight loss revolution has started, and it is here to stay, right? So 1 out of 8 women, I think, is now on some sort of medical weight loss drug. We're starting to see all this sort of weight loss transformation. It's causing anatomical changes women like and anatomical changes they don't like. And so it is drawing the attention to the lower body, to the legs and the booty area, and it's making them really think, what can I do there?
And there's also, I want to talk about, because you just said this, the changes that women are starting to go through, the emotional impact that cellulite has on women.
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you brought this up, right? So because I've been in this space for so long. And like I said, I think the biggest misperception is that self-confidence is a nice to have versus a must have. So I would say that when it comes down to cellulite, we've done quite a bit of research. And to no one's surprise, especially the women listening to all of this, right? Cellulite is actually a very embarrassing topic to most women. It's not like a wrinkle where we say, oh, I wish I could look a few years younger, right? Cellulite is something that we don't easily talk about because, like all that research validates, women are so bothered. And for so many years, because this happens post-puberty, it's not diet related, it's not age related. Most women get their cellulite as early as the post-puberty phase. And so it's not something you can exercise away. It's not something that you can change with eating habits. And so when you look at essentially how restricting it is to women, we have so many women that say, I've never wore shorts. I will not step out of my bed, essentially without anything sort of covering my thighs or my legs. We have so many women that say, I stopped running because I can't stand sort of the sight of my cellulite. So it is very restrictive. And so most women don't bring it up with either their friends or with a medical aesthetic practitioner. And so what do is they turn to creams and lotions, knowing very well they don't work. And also because they have stopped believing that something actually might solve that issue of cellulite.
And that's a big thing. I think 90% of women essentially get cellulite, right? Yeah. It's a variation, obviously the degrees, and that's what the practitioner told me as well. Yeah. The stage 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. But some of us, like let's say I'm very, very petite. I work out, I eat super clean, I'm very hydrated, I don't even drink. Yeah. I have cellulite. Yeah. And I would be very self-conscious. And I know right now we're going for this whole thing of body positivity and accept your body as it is. But why not, if you can do things to make yourself look and feel better, why are we not allowing women to step into that and really own that narrative? Which a treatment like Avéli does, I've tried other things before, and this for me personally was the most effective treatment that I tried because I saw the results pretty much right away. But I felt so much better being like, I can wear short shorts if I want to. Just having that optionality was amazing and liberating. Yeah,
you're right. So 9 out of 10 of women have cellulite, right? And so when we launched, we really focused first and foremost on making sure that the clinical results would meet patients' expectations. And so to that point, we wanted to make sure that when we would launch to the world, that women would understand that what causes cellulite. And now there is something that works because we address the underlying anatomy. And then to your point, there was also, how do we face sort of all the social stigmas, right? Should you just accept those dimples and divots and just be content with having those? Or should we empower women that if they are so bothered that it inhibits them in any way, we should give them a choice and go seek some proper medical advice on how it can be addressed. And so obviously, very proud to say that, we've come out essentially with a technology that truly works. And also with the message that if you are bothered by your cellulite, and again, it sort of stifles you in any way, that there is the option. And in our case, Avéli has been FDA approved or FDA cleared, as we say, for the long-term reduction of cellulite, buttock as well as thigh. It is a one-time treatment. It's minimally invasive. So we do it as an awake procedure in just a medical treatment room. And essentially with a little instrument, we go underneath that skin and we release those bands, and that reduces or that smooths the surface of the skin.
And for somebody who might be listening and is like, okay, what if I get it done once and then cellulite comes back in a different area, right?
Yeah.
So up to how many rounds of Avéli can somebody do?
Yeah, great question. So Avéli is truly a one-time treatment, meaning that biologically, if you release those bands that have been tensioning or pulling down the skin, they don't actually reattach, readhere, or regrow. So in the areas that your cellulite is treated, they should not reattach and again, sort of anchor or tether that skin, triggering that cellulite. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't get cellulite in other places, right? Because we have millions of those bands underneath our skin that can shrink or stiffen. And so, but in the areas where you are being treated with your cellulite in those specific dimples, you should not need another Avéli treatment. Now, where sometimes the medical practitioner will recommend a second treatment is, for example, if you have hundreds of dimples in your buttock or your thighs, right? So then maybe it's a 2-stage process. But the cellulite that gets treated with Avéli does not need to be retreated. Again, that does not mean that you won't get cellulite or dimples in other areas. And when those do occur, then obviously you might want to receive another one. Yeah.
To have another treatment. And I also want to talk about some myths because we're talking about how cellulite is essentially boxed in these ways that is just not true because like you said, 9 out of 10, 90% of women have cellulite. So people are like, cellulite is excess fat. That's not true because very skinny people can have cellulite. Diet and exercise can eliminate cellulite. Now, it can make it better, but I can tell you in my case, it did not eliminate it.
Yes.
And then only overweight or obese people have cellulite. This is another thing they tell us. And it's like, no. Very skinny people who work on their skin laxity. And listen, also skin is genetic, right? The laxity in my skin versus, let's say somebody who's Brazilian is completely different because of my genetic background, right? And so you can't go against genes in that way.
That's right. And I think that's so true. I think cellulite, first and foremost, unlike other aesthetic things, it is a skin condition, right? And so what do we know about the skin? The quality of your skin oftentimes is genetic. It's a hormonal kind of driven issue. And so same thing with cellulite. Cellulite is not body related, not age related, not weight related, because we have now treated almost 6,000 women with Avéli. And they're all different body types, all different demographics, all different ages. To your point, we have the slimmest, fittest, most good-looking sort of body types, but again, with sort of deep dimples. And again, that sort of speaks to the fact that it is a post-puberty issue. And so truly diet or exercise does not help. Of course, that's good for your overall well-being, and we always recommend that. But in treating and smoothing out that skin and treating those dimples, it really does very little. But of course, everybody has been seeking a cellulite solution for so long. So there are creams and lotions and potions that obviously promise the world. And so I think it is often very confusing for women to just figuring out what's going to work and what will not work, right? But I think those are excellent sort of challenges that we should talk about. And I think that the more kind of conversations we can have like this, the more we can address it.
And in your personal opinion, this is just what you like or you've seen, friends of yours, yourself, what treatments have you liked combining with your Avéli for the skin laxity?
Yeah, so obviously I am not a doctor. I'm not a medical practitioner, right? But I would say that, again, we've almost treated, 6,000 women, right? And so also the satisfaction rating on Avéli is extremely high. If you go into Real Self, we have a 91% worth it rating, which we're very proud of. So that has given us confidence to obviously have a critical lens and say, in a medical practice, how do medical practitioners also then solve for these other distinct issues like laxity, like fat, that in the lower extremities would be great adjunct therapies when we're treating the cellulite with Avéli? And so to answer your question, we obviously we're extremely proud that Avéli is a very strong solution or a very strong treatment for cellulite. To treat the laxity and to treat sort of the fat, there are many different combinations we've seen. I think that if you are wanting to stay more on a non-surgical, minimally invasive side for the laxity component, there's obviously radiofrequency microneedling therapies, and many doctors and medical kind of aesthetic practices have different tools. Like you had Morpheus 8. We hear lots of women being very content with that. But then also there's J-Plasma or Renuvion that works for skin tightening. That also seems to be a really good solution. But again, you should talk about it with your medical practitioner. And then for fat, there are many different options, right? You can go for non-surgical treatments, multiple treatment sessions, or you can go for liposuction. So we see many, many different combinations. But again, I think it's really important you talk to your medical aesthetic practitioner and say, what do I have here, right? Laxity, fat, cellulite, and then what would be the right sort of protocol for me.
May is dedicated to women's health and hormones here on Biohack-it. And you can't talk about women's health without talking about birth control. Birth control is not and should not be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think too many times we're handed a pill without knowing the side effects and what is truly best for our individual, unique, and beautiful bodies. If you want a natural, hormone-free birth control option with no side effects, I highly recommend you check out Natural Cycles, which is one of my personal favorite apps that I've been using. Natural Cycles analyzes your body's temperature to let you know if you're having a fertile or non-fertile day. You can either take your temperature when you first wake up, or you can pair it the way I do with my Oura Ring or an Apple Watch. Natural Cycles is FDA cleared, backed by science, and is the birth control method I've been using for the past year. And if you want to give Natural Cycles a try, use code BIOHACK at naturalcycles.com to get 15% off an annual subscription and a free thermometer. Natural Cycles is for 18 plus and does not protect against STIs. And I wanted to go back a little bit. I know we spoke a lot about Avéli, but your role also being a female CEO, right? How are you balancing that with 3 little kids? And running this company that's a growing company at the end of the day? You know, you guys are scaling, you're getting into so many practitioners' offices. How do you balance it?
You know, I think balance is an interesting question, right? And I'd love to say I figured this all out and I have the recipe, but I think it depends on the day. I have my good days, I have my bad days, but I think ultimately it comes down to how passionate are you about what you're doing. I feel very passionate about, to your point, right? Similar to why you started your agency, why you have this podcast. I feel extremely committed to really helping women, what we call reveal their true selves. I believe in technologies. I believe in medical treatments. And when something works, I will be all in, full force, really making sure that those treatments find their way into the market. And medical aesthetics has been a passion of mine, right? Like I said, I think that to build women up from the inside, to make everything easier, less inhibitive, and obviously give them the assurance that we all want, I think is some of the most profound, purposes that you can have in life. And also for my kids, I translate that mission to how I look at the world for my children. I want my kids to be extremely confident. I want them to have all the options in the world that they want to pursue. And so I make it work, but it also means I have great support at home. I have a husband who is an incredibly involving father, so I'm extremely lucky that way. And my kids also have this understanding. I'm an immigrant, so I came to the United States, on a visa, and I'm still on a visa. And so I have it ingrained in me that you have to work hard, right, for the things that you love and that you care deeply about. And you have to earn things. They're never going to be given to you. And my kids understand that. And so when I travel all the time and when I work all the time, I make them understand why that is, right? So it is to give them a future, but it's also because I think that's, if you have that sort of intellectual curiosity and you want to do something good, it's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot have So.
And something you said, which was so nice, that no 2 days look the same.
No.
Right?
That's right.
And you can have it all, just not all at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's just finding that kind of tipping and balancing of what works. And I guess when you're with your kids, really trying to spend that time with them.
Yeah.
But I think it's amazing to have 3 little girls and have them look at a working mom as a role model, leading the charge of such a big company and growing it and scaling it. Yeah. I think that alone instills a lot of self-confidence in little girls. Yeah. Saying that my mom is like the superhero for me, and there she is kind of conquering the world. And that's an amazing thing to watch growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and also these future generations, right? I think it's very important that we help them navigate sort of, how to essentially set yourself up for success in the future. I mean, all the technologies, all the exposure they have, those are things that we didn't back then, right? And I think that makes life harder and easier in many different ways. And so I think to keep your kids grounded in sort of some very traditional kind of core values, which is you have to work hard in life. Yeah. You have to give it your very best. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. If you're going to sell something, right, or you're going to be a businesswoman or a businessman, you have to sell things that work, right? And so I explain my kids all these basics, and so does my husband. My husband's a fireman, so for him, work is life or death, right? And so for me, it's a little differently, and we try to teach our kids all these different sort of very core, basic fundamentals in an easy to digest way because they're still little, right?
They're still little, and they're learning and they're adapting. But those are great foundations through which kids will springboard. And develop their self-identity and who they're going to be in the world and how they're going to interact and see the world.
Yeah, that's right.
And that all starts at a really, really young age. So to telling them to lead with passion, lead with integrity, stand behind the things that you believe in and stand behind it full-heartedly are great just life lessons that will build them as adults.
Yeah. And also I think to the point of what I think is very important for my kids in particular, right? Or for kind of young girls. Again, going back to when we started in medical aesthetics, right? Remember the one of the big taboos was, is it vanity, right? So, are you really spending all this money on yourselves or injectables? Is it so vain and so on? And so I think for me now with medical aesthetics, it's really important for my kids to understand the value of all of that. Like, what does it mean for a woman to feel really good in her own skin? And so my kids obviously work that I work on a cellulite treatment. So we say we make the booty and the legs sort of smoother. And so my 6-year-old was asked by her teacher, what does your mom do? And my girl says, my mom is a butt doctor. And the whole class started laughing, right? And so my 6-year-old got so offended and she's like, this is really important. Smoothing that bottom and those legs. It makes women feel really good, she said. And I thought that again, that was so important, right? So to instill upon them that how women feel is actually the crux of it all.
Yeah.
Right.
Another thing that for me, and I'm so glad you just said that because I think women just think they have to go through life and walk in a man's shoes and be like, why are we trying to walk in a man's shoes? We're women. We can walk in our own shoes, still be as successful, as powerful, make as much money, but still look and feel good, right? Why should we let that side of ours go just because, we're trying to compete for a role, which traditionally has belonged to men. Yeah. I think how we carry ourselves and present ourselves and how our self-confidence comes across is very important.
Yeah, I agree.
Something you said about obviously you love medical aesthetics. What in all the years of experience that you've had and things you've tried and seen it all almost and seen all the data and science, what have you, besides Avéli, treatments that you have loved for yourself? Can be face, can be body, anything. And what are things like, I think a lot of treatments have, like some treatments have been snake oil, but from trying them, from my personal experience. But I'd love to hear from an expert like yourself. Yeah.
So it's a great question. And again, medical aesthetics has become such a big industry, right? And I think that has come with pros and cons. I think that for manufacturers entering into the space, some have really elevated standards, meaning strong clinical studies, really getting all the scientific evidence that women need to essentially put their hard-earned dollars, into an aesthetic treatment, right? Because let's not forget, none of this is reimbursable. So if we're going to spend on a medical aesthetic treatment, it's our own hard-earned money that we're putting to work.
It's expensive.
And it's expensive. And in many ways, rightfully so, right? These are medical aesthetic treatments that you're going to a medical aesthetic practitioners. And like many of these doctors, their staff have been trained for years, right? In how to administer these treatments safely and effectively. So in terms of things that work, I always say we all have different needs, right? From sort of the face all the way down to sort of the legs and so on. But I think there are some common sort of, things that you should be looking for, which is what's the science behind this treatment, right? So look up the data. Ask your medical aesthetic practitioner what they know about the data. What studies have they done on it? Can I see photographic evidence? I think that is one of the most important things in medical aesthetic, which is before and afters tell everything. And you should always ask your practice, show me some before and afters. And not just one set, not even 2 sets or 3. Ask to see more before and afters. So you really get a good understanding, what does this treatment do in different patient types?
And level set that expectation.
Right? And look at the result and say, would this be worth my money? Would I be happy with that kind of result? So I always say, ask for the data. The science always tells you everything. Can you understand the science when somebody explains it to you? So in the case of Avéli, right, when we talk about cellulite, it's a mechanical issue for which we have designed now a mechanical problem, which is, yes, your skin will thin, fat cells become bigger. Everybody understands that. And when you have bands underneath that pull down the skin, it's logical to understand that if you go underneath that skin and you release those bands, that you ease that tension on the skin and you smooth that out a bit. So that's easy to understand. So any medical aesthetic treatment you've heard of that you're interested in, ask for somebody who's an expert to explain how it really works. And really, even as a woman who's not a medical aesthetic practitioner, see if you understand it. Then ask to see the before and after pictures so that you have a really good grasp of what it does and what it does not do. And then I think very importantly, in the world of medical aesthetic treatments, I always say that every aesthetic issue has a degree of severity, meaning, you have mild wrinkles or you have severe wrinkles, you have mild cellulite, you have severe cellulite. And I do think you have to have an appreciation that depending on how severe your issue is, that you may want to ladder up in sort of the types of treatments that you consider. So for example, when we started, it was everything had to be non-invasive, right? So no local anesthesia, never no surgery. Well, we're 20 years further now, right? And so even plastic surgery doesn't have the downtime or sort of the invasiveness anymore that we used to think. And they're very elegant procedures. So I'd always say that be open-minded to all the options presented to you and then decide what's important, right? The result, is it one time? Would I be willing to maybe have 10 treatment sessions versus 1 treatment? So I think those are all things that you have to ask about.
I think that was one of the things that really attracted me to Avéli, was that you go in, it is, invasive, but they numb you. There was no discomfort, and I hate pain, but there was no discomfort for me. I was in and out about an hour and a half, I would say about 2 hours. And I just had to wear a compression garment for 2 weeks. But I had no downtime. I went back to my life the next day. And so you can get a treatment. You can go back to carry on with your day. So you're not taking time out of work. And then I feel like closer to the summer, I'm now hitting my 3-month mark. I'm like kind of ready for the summer because those little dimples have disappeared, and I'm working on the skin laxity and I'm just feeling better. And so that also plays into, and so anybody listening to this, another big thing to ask about is the downtime and what are the results like? What's the healing process like? Is it 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year? And what can you expect on those milestones?
And I'm so happy you had this experience, right? That you can relate this, because I think it's very important for those of women that don't really know what Avéli is, like what should I, anticipate? And so we call it a minimally invasive treatment in the sense that there will be local anesthesia involved. So essentially all your dimples, anything that has like I said, a skin kind of unevenness, that has edges on your buttock or your thigh that you're unhappy about, those things get marked, and your provider will discuss those areas with you, right? And then essentially you're laying prone, sort of kind of on your belly on the table, and then some local anesthesia gets applied. So we essentially numb the track that we're going to tunnel through with the device. And it feels a little like dental work, right? So you don't have pain, but you feel sort of the tugging by essentially identifying these little bands and releasing them. And so after the procedure, what we always say is you're going to bruise, and bruising is very patient dependent, but you'll bruise for a couple of weeks. You might feel sore, and so they'll give you they'll generally recommend taking some Tylenol. And then we always say wear some Lululemons or some Spanx, some kind of compression garment, if you will, for a few weeks so that you feel comfortable. And so again, I think to your point, this is not kind of a surgical downtime procedure. Like I said, it's bruising, you'll feel a little sore. and you'll have to wear some tight leggings for a while.
For me, the bruising really wasn't that bad. I know it can vary in patients and stuff as well, but I was on really high grade turmeric and arnica and stuff. So for me and bromelain, I think, because the bruising really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And the discomfort levels can also vary. But what I loved about it, I walked in, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. They level set my expectations, which was nice.
Yeah.
Because a lot of treatments don't exactly tell you. They're like, yes. They're like, no, this is treatable.
Yeah.
This is not treatable.
Yeah.
This is skin laxity. And this is just kind of part of the aging process.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop the aging process, but it helps you look and feel better.
Yeah.
And you can be realistic about what's going to be the outcome of this treatment.
Yeah. So the nice thing is we now have almost 6,000 patients treated. We're in many great practices. I think you went to Pure Plastic, Dr. Earl, who's phenomenal. Lovely. He's been one of the early adopters of our technology, somebody who's extremely intelligent, very well trained, a pioneer of many different techniques. And for him, everything is about the detail. Everything is about safety and efficacy. So we're now in sort of, almost 600 practices around the country. And so it's been wonderful to really kind of make sure that we could partner with those practices and make sure that as a woman, when you do look up an Avéli provider, you'll find your way to really established centers of excellence. And to your point, where the expectations will be set, there will be a really good consultation about what is cellulite, what is laxity, what is fat. And you will always find yourself in a practice where they will propose different sort of protocols where they will treat those distinct issues in a way that I think is very satisfactory.
Also from a lifestyle perspective, because, a lot of our listeners are into health and wellness and kind of biohacking. When women's hormones shift, that happens with age, it happens over time. And then, it's the time that you enter into adolescence. It's the time you go into perimenopause. It's the time that you go into menopause. Those hormonal shifts, which are natural because you're a woman and those will happen, those shifts and changes can also affect the appearance of your cellulite.
Absolutely.
And so having in mind, even if you're working with an incredible functional medicine doctor, even if you're working with a great nutritionist, dietitian, whatever it is, they will be able to treat it to an extent, but it's natural changes that are happening to your body. And even if you do hormone replacement therapy, which women tend to want to choose when they enter menopause, it doesn't fully take away, something like skin laxity or cellulite. So it's an age thing, right? And it happens to the best of us and all of us. And women have essentially 4 hormone cycles a month versus a man has a 24-hour hormone cycle. And it's just bound to happen to us. Obviously, the severity can affect your personal body, like we discussed, your genetics, a lot of different things, but it's inevitable. So I know having this stuff in our toolkit is a great resource for us to have as women, to have as an option. Yeah. You just have one more option that can work if you choose to take it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the most important thing, right? We often look at Google Analytics, right? Sort of really trying to understand what are women searching for, because the volume of those searches really tell you everything about what's top of mind for them and what are real concerns. And so similar to how liposuction, right, became actually the #1 body procedure in the United States last year. Cellulite is essentially a term that women search for on Google at the same amount, sort of at the same velocity as they do liposuction. So it's incredible, right? But again, it shows you that women, it's a $3 billion cream market. And we all know, we're smarter than that. We know it doesn't work, right? Yeah. Because we've tried those creams, moi included. But again, we're so looking for something that actually is going to make that skin look better. And what I think has been interesting is, to your point, right? We see women of all ages, of all sort of stages in life being affected by this. We have patients where they are super young, they are late 20s, that have had these deep dimples that will never wear leggings, never wear shorts, and that have been bothered by them forever. And even those 1 or 2 dimples, for them, it means everything to get them treated. While other women, to your point, it's sort of postmenopausal or essentially post-babies, and all those hormones essentially have taken a toll on the quality of our skin, right? And to whom all of a sudden this cellulite is so, I think, pervasive and really bothersome to them. But what I would also say, what's been, I think, eye-opening, women don't just want their cellulite treated because we want to look good naked. it's also just about wearing tight clothing. And nowadays, right, it's all the tight leggings, the light colored leggings, flashy colors. When you have cellulite on your buttock and your thighs, right, which I did, and quite a lot of it, you would never wear that kind of a clothing, right? And so treating cellulite in a way that really works, I think, is very freeing for a lot of women.
Obviously, you all know I'm a biohacking fanatic and I absolutely love peptides. So you can only understand how excited I was when I discovered a skincare brand that works, that uses peptides. That is OneSkin. OneSkin uses the amazing OS1 peptide. OS1 works by actually switching off the senescent cells that drive the aging of your skin. Scientifically proven to give you biologically younger skin with long-lasting improvements in firmness, elasticity, reduction of fine lines and wrinkles, and a more youthful complexion. You can learn more about the OS1 peptide at oneskin.co and use my code Biohack-it for 15% off your purchase. Especially because nowadays you have back 15, 20 years ago, now workout gear is so cute.
So cute.
You wear it every day, you wear it out. But I'm telling you, I would never wear shorts, workout shorts. And I'm in pretty good shape. But because I felt so self-conscious about having this kind of pressing and dimpling that I didn't want to go for yoga and wear something like that or Pilates because I was so self-conscious. I spent half my workout thinking about the back of my legs versus just focusing on the workout. I was like, to hell with that. I just want it taken care of.
Yeah. And that's also one of the reasons why when I first received the call back in late 2018, 19, from the professor of medicine at Stanford University, who's one of the founders of our technology, he called me up and he said, my name is Dr. Josh Mackauer, and I think I might have something that really works for cellulite. And my first reaction was like, sure you do. Right?
Yes.
And I thought to myself, there is no way. But I became so passionate about taking this technology and really building this company and really sort of making it available to women, because to your point, cellulite is such a topic that has so much stigma around it. And unlike a wrinkle or other things we talk about, even breast augmentation, wanting to change the shape, the size of your breast, when you talk about cellulite, the words that women bring up, it is paralyzing. Really, they will talk about it as disgusting, embarrassing, would never do X, Y, Z. It's restrictive.
Limiting.
It's so restrictive and limiting in so many ways. And so that really made this a very meaningful mission. Let's truly kind of work on something
feel better.
Right, exactly.
In a way that's affordable, sustainable, and approachable.
Yeah.
And you know where you're getting. I think the big thing I'll go back to is people have been promised the sun and the moon when it comes to cellulite treatments. They've been promised so many different things. And a lot of things just have not worked.
Yeah.
And I think this minimally invasive procedure that you guys have, knowing that women know what they can get. For example, when I went in, I knew what my outcome would kind of look like because they kind of walked me through it, and they showed me before and afters of people with some similar skin texture or ethnic background. This means that, hey, this is what it's gonna kind of look like versus somebody else, So to be realistic about that.
Yeah. And we have, one of the things that was very important to me, again, to the question that you asked earlier, which I think is such an important question, which is, how do you know if something really works, right? Because in medical aesthetics, if you don't really know what you're looking for, it's easy to essentially be fooled, right? So lots of claims come at us and you don't know, is that actually a medical treatment that was investigated through proper clinical studies, or is this just a cream that you can sell, through kind of retail? But I think that in this case, when we launched, we wanted to make sure that all of our real world results would become instantly visible to women. One
of the areas they can't treat, though, and maybe Gutter, you can walk me through this, is just under the buttocks, the banana roll area, they call it. So when I went in, they were like, this is one area that we cannot treat. And I want to understand a little bit more about the science behind that specific area.
So it's a good kind of, let's talk about it the European way, right? Of a good 5 to 6 centimeters underneath that bottom of your buttock region. We call it the gluteal crease, right? Sort of the end of the buttock. And then you have sort of a band right underneath it. And we generally shy away from treating that area because oftentimes that is more like a bit of a bulging of fat, accumulation of a fat pocket underneath that. And when you have dimples in that area, or right kind of at the rim of that little outpouching kind of fat area, what you want to be careful of is that if you release, right, that area, then what happens is that what may occur is that little fat pocket redistributes down. It's almost like an avalanche, right? Sort of, it just shifts down, and that's not a good appearance either. And so again, the right expert will assess that and say they will be able to understand that if I treat this, what will happen to the surrounding tissue? Because again, in the lower extremities, you have laxity, you have fat, you have cellulite. And so a well-trained provider will essentially look at all these issues and really think through, if I do this, what will happen around it?
Right.
And so that's why we generally stay away from treating that area, because oftentimes that is a bit of fat involved, and that fat may redistribute down, which is not something that we want. Yeah.
And when it comes to obviously seeing the results in terms of recovery, they said to me generally it's about 3 months, and then kind of up to the 6-month mark is when you continue to see the rebuild and the recovery from it. How long was it for you personally?
Yeah, so when we did our 1-year study, we obviously assessed the patients at 3 months, at 6 months, and then obviously at 1 year. So we always say, give it some time for the bruising and the swelling to subside, right? That's important because we go underneath the skin, right? And we release those bands. So you're going to bruise, you're going to have a little bit of swelling. So you really want that all to settle in order for you to assess sort of the true results. But generally what happens is when we release those bands, that tension eases immediately, right? And so you will see a very nice result already sort of in the very sort of short period after your procedure. But we always say, let the bruising, let the swelling subside, and take a really good look. And at 3 months, you should really be kind of fully healed, if not before, depending on how many dimples were treated. And then that result will just sustain. So that's why it is a one-time treatment. We're FDA cleared for the long-term reduction of cellulite.
So far, out of the 6,000 women that have been treated, who has been the youngest and who has been the oldest, like age range? I just want to know.
Good question. I don't think I can answer that right. In our clinical study, I can obviously, tell you kind of what we enrolled, which was late 20s and up. But I think that anecdotally from certain practices, we've had, women in early 20s, I would say. But I think every medical aesthetic, practitioner is a little different in terms of the age restrictions. So.
And when it comes to medical aesthetics, what do you most, obviously Avéli is like being so incredible in what it's giving women in terms of confidence when it comes to cellulite. But personally as a woman, having experienced the space for so long, you've seen so much.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about over the next decade?
Yeah, it's a great question. And something I feel extremely passionate about. I've been in this space since the early days, the beginning of Botox Cosmetic. And I always like to remind people, when Botox Cosmetic was launched, there were lotions and potions, and there were hardcore surgery, and there was nothing in between. Injectables was a foreign concept. And so look at where we are today, right? So socialized. Yeah. We talk about Botox or any other neuromodulator and fillers, very comfortably. I think it's a very normalized topic. But what happened is that I would say over the last 2 decades, facial rejuvenation is a very established sort of, beauty regime. And I feel that beautiful work and great progress has been made in that area. I also think that if we just descend then further down, there's a lot of great progress, amazing techniques that have been applied to breast rejuvenation, right? Either restoration, augmentation, you name it. And I would also say in the last decade, amazing work has been done in the midriff, sort of that area, right? Tummy tucks, the techniques for that are superb. But what I'm most excited about is sort of the beauty below the belt, as we say it, which is, again, with the medical weight loss revolution here to stay, women are losing sort of weight, that they never imagined was possible. And I think it's drawing a lot of attention to the legs and the booty area. And I think all sort of the advancements that are possible and that are starting to happen for the legs, reshaping the legs, recontouring the legs, shape of the booty, I think I'm extremely excited about those because, again, I think those have been really restrictive areas for women in terms of what we wear and how comfortable we feel.
It's a big part of our body.
It's a big Right,
you know?
exactly. The lower thirds of the body. And I see some amazing progress. To your point, skin tightening technologies, cellulite technologies, areas to kind of resolve and contour and slim the fat. I think some very exciting work is happening. So body contouring and body aesthetics, I feel like will truly be the next frontier in medical aesthetics, and a lot of great progress will be made.
And it's exciting to see also how open we're starting to become as a culture about
Right.
normalizing talking about treatments
Right.
that we're doing
Yeah.
and sharing it, because back even 10 years ago, it was taboo to share about your Botox. Now people have normalized that conversation. The women talk amongst each other. You're not gatekeeping anymore. You're opening about what you've got done so it can maybe help somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. And I think also the more informed we're becoming through podcasts like yours, right? Those things weren't available to us even a couple of years ago. We would never talk about this, right, on a podcast. But I think it's also kind of destigmatized a lot of other areas, like, for example, BBLs, huge controversial topic, right? And even still today, and to some degree, legitimately so. But what does it actually mean? It just means enhancement, right, of the body, of the booty curvature. And so again, now lots of surgeons are really bringing that topic to the forefront and talking about what does it mean to athletically or elegantly reshape kind of the booty area and so on. And so I'm very pleased that these conversations are happening so that women who are interested can feel less alone in wanting to do something about it, and they can actually find their way to informed channels and really good providers that are going to help them.
You know, something you just said made me think about something. So a couple of weeks ago, I brought on two really famous body plastic surgeons, Dr. Ryan Neinstein, Dr. Pear. They're based in New York, and they're known for their mommy makeovers. And they say a lot of women feel like they have their kids and it's the end of their body. It's the end of their life. They'll never feel their best again. And that's it. Life
I know
is
it
over.
all too well.
Yeah. And so they say when these women come back to them, they've had moms in their 60s be like, you know what? It's finally time. I'm going to go do this. And they have these mommy makeovers and their lives are transformed. And the confidence it gives these women, and they feel like they have a second chance at life. And it goes back to that sometimes women feel like, okay, shit, I've had these kids. And like you said, from personal experience, you're like, oh, my body's never gonna be the same again. But now that we have all these technologies available to us, all this research, we can choose how we age and how we look as we age. And so if anything, it's better than ever before in order to want to do it backwards and go back and have the body that maybe you never had to begin with, but maybe now with these tools and technologies and surgery, you can get it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think self-acceptance means also accepting what you really want. And if you don't want to accept that post-baby body, then don't accept it. Then do what everybody else does, which is essentially get super informed. There are so many channels you can turn to, so many experts you can turn to, and just, know that you'll be in great hands. So that's what I would say.
And one of the things I want to flag for anybody listening and you want to look up Avéli, what I loved about it was when I was looking at practitioners, and you have amazing vetted practitioners. I've seen that you have a great list of people, because I knew a lot of the surgeons and locations. So how do you vet your list of practitioners?
It's a great
you guys
question.
have done a great job.
Yes. And when we entered the market with Avéli, we had done all of our studies. We had received our FDA clearance. We also wanted to have a long-term reduction for cellulite claim based on our long-term study. And so when we had all that in hand, we knew that our biggest competition wasn't going to be another technology. We knew that our biggest competition would be the skepticism and the cynicism that really something would actually work for cellulite. So to your point, what we did is we really hand selected sort of the practitioners that we knew shared our standards and our values for let's do this the right way. Let's pick the right patients. Let's make sure that we get all the photographs to really show to other patients that this could work. And so we've had an opportunity to partner with amazing practices where they have amazing providers, meaning excellent attention to detail, really wanting to learn what is cellulite, what is laxity, what is fat, and that could manage expectations really well. And then that had really the attention, for detail for a procedure like Avéli. And so as a result of that, when you want to find a provider for Avéli, all you have to do is go to the website. There's a provider locator on there, and you'll see all the great practices that have really become very committed to producing great results.
I absolutely love that. And I'm just so inspired to meet somebody working medical aesthetics with your incredible background and, being a mom of 3 and just being straightforward to the point without the bullshit. And it's so nice to learn from you. And, when I was researching you and seeing your background, I was like, wow, like traditionally what has been a male dominated industry, there's been this incredible woman who's come forward and she's so passionate about the work that she's doing with Avéli and trying to help women change their lives. So thank you for coming on the podcast and just being a guest and sharing your story where other women can also be inspired by what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me and thank you for the compliment. I would say that, I've built a company and I'm very fortunate to have surrounded myself with people who share that same sort of, work ethic and also that discipline in life. And so again, I would say very passionate about this field. I think medical aesthetics is going to continue to evolve. And I think that's going to be a game changer for women, right? And also men. I think that again, what it does for us in self-confidence translates into success in life, period, full stop on everything. And so I think get yourself informed, be unapologetic, be unapologetic about what you want, right? To essentially, even if it's making small refinements to your body, whatever will make you feel better. Again, that is an investment well worth all the money and the energy.
Absolutely.
And yes, very passionate about essentially finding my way into channels like yours. And I would compliment you also on creating this podcast. I think the more women will listen to this information, I think they'll know better what to do and they'll have more confidence taking that next step. And then I think there's so many providers out there that do amazing work.
And this is the whole thing of the Biohack-it community that I was building. I was like, I want to be authentic about my journey.
Yeah.
I don't want to gatekeep. I'm helping myself. Why would I not want to help other women feel and look their best? And if I found something that works for me, which is what happened, and then I reached out to you guys, I said, I'd love for you to come on the podcast. I want other people to know about it because I want to uplift other women listening and give them options and potential tools if they choose to want to do it. It's all an option, right?
Yeah.
So there's a closing ceremony that I have on my podcast. And I ask this question to all my guests. So obviously I'm going to ask it to you as well. What is the one lesson or learning to date that has been the most impactful and has carried with you throughout your journey?
I would say waiting is a waste of internal conflict, and I feel very passionate about that. When I look back at sort of my own journey, personally, professionally, I think overthinking can be an enemy. And I'll always say to anybody that wants to learn about my background, I generally was always the most, unqualified person for any job that I've ever had. But I did have an intellectual curiosity and I did have a work ethic and I was going to outwork anybody like any immigrant generally does. And I would say that I've never waited for things to come to me, to be given to me. I've always raised my hand for any challenge or solution that I saw. And so I truly think that waiting generally is a waste of internal conflict.
Thank you for doing this incredible work for women and letting us find a way to, I would say, tackle this annoying problem of cellulite, which really hounds so many of us and really bothers us on a very deep level.
Yeah. And I hear it all the time. Women come to me saying, I actually never thought that there was something that could work for cellulites. And again, all of you out there, 90% of us have it. It's not your fault. You can't diet it away. You can't exercise it away. And yes, we've all believed at some point that a cream would work. But if you understand that those dimples just come from bands that put tension on the skin, then find a solution that is logical, right? And so Avéli may be a great treatment option for you. Go check out some practices, listen to stories like yours, like mine. We both had the treatment. I certainly wasn't going to sell anything that I wouldn't experience myself.
And that's you after 3 kids.
Right,
you're
that's
like,
3 kids, right? I also spend a lot of time sort of really making sure that my mental and my health kind of stays intact. But when I went to see my provider, who's a good girlfriend of mine, she's a plastic surgeon, she's like, girl, you've got some craters here. So, girlfriends can say that to one another. So I too was really in need of something that worked, and super pleased that I did it. And that gave me the confidence to really, be very passionate about promoting something like this. So
Thank you for the work you're doing and for this incredible technology.
you.
I'm so excited I discovered it. I discovered it off Instagram with someone's before and after. And then I researched the brand. I followed them, you guys, on Instagram for about 3 months. And finally got in touch and said, hey, look, what are the providers in my area? And so I did all the due diligence, and I personally love the results. And so I would encourage anyone listening, if you're curious or even want to explore more, definitely do your research and get to know the company.
And since I'm talking to a branding expert, in case some of you are wondering what does the name Avéli mean, we wanted to make a point that there's advancements in every field. That means things are going to start working better. And so Avéli is just advanced and verifiable together, meaning when you have this procedure and essentially those bands are released underneath the skin, your expert will verify that they're releasing those bands before they move on to treating the next dimple. So, and then life is just, you know, because it's an issue that most of us have in life. And so it's a combination of all those things in a name, and that's what Avéli stands for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming down and doing this.
It was a joy.